G'day community and welcome to the Jock, Reynolds, Supercoach podcast. I am Lekdog. We are recording on Monday night after the Geelong and Hawthorn game, and I'm joined by Damo. How are you?
I'm good, Lek. How are you, mate?
I'm fantastic. We'll talk all about Supercoach shortly, but I've got to introduce Clarky. A pleasure to have you on.
It's wonderful to be here, direct from the ISS because I'm in fucking space. 3-0 for the Melbourne boys. That's a good result. I'm having a good time.
Miracles do happen. Obviously, we're not going to talk about the Carlton game because Damo's on the pod and we don't want him to be too sad. But you know what we can talk about, Damo, that'll make you feel good? Supercoach and how are you travelling, my friend?
I thought we were supposed to talk about things that'll make me feel good.
All right, so not going super well there, Damo. What troubles you this season so far?
Oh, everything. I tried to be as guns and rookies as much as possible, and that definitely was not the play for this season.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it was. I had some luck in the first couple of weeks avoiding the mid-prices that didn't fire, but then they have gone bang in round 3, and we'll talk about them. It's not too late to jump on. Clarky, before we get into the specifics, how's your team travelling? How are you going? How are you vibing this season so far?
Yeah, I think I'm probably in a very lucky bracket where I kind of have potential to do better. I've been hurt a lot by some underperforming premium players recently, but I'm sitting currently rank 5,000, just outside the 4,000s. So I'm pretty happy with where I am. I'm sort of just pushing through with 2100s, 2200s around that mark. So definitely room to go either way. So I'm pretty happy with how it's all turned out at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that it's a very long season. I know a lot of people have had to burn through a lot of trades, and there is a couple of injuries that we'll talk about as well, which are going to force trades as well. Generally, historically, this is the round where we hold fire. Patch told me to tell everyone on the pod, he said, hold fire. Round 3, there's not going to be many players on the bubble. We don't jump off our primos too early, but he's not here, and I reckon we're going to advise the opposite as we go on. The first thing I want to do, fellas, is talk Hayden Young. Damo, obviously, he went down with injury. We can't hold him if we started him. What are the options we have as a replacement for him?
Heath Chapman is a good option. He didn't play round 1, so he is on the bubble this week and scored 86 on his in his game against the Blues. Took a lot of instep marks. Really took over that Hayden Young role after Hayden Young went off and was quite comfortable doing it. So he's the best option at 148k. He's probably the main option you can go with. If you've got some cash in the bank, you could go up to CJ Jath, or however you'd say his name. He has had a price rise, but he looks like he's going to be a good scorer for the year.
Yeah, he's fitting into that similar mold to Jarman Impey this year. Playing in the back line was awesome today. Had some really electric moments. Pumped out a 118, backed up his 119. I'll say this off the top. I've been too precious in the past, Clarky, about jumping on these mid-prices when they're not at bargain basement. I think you can afford to jump on some of these guys, even though they've had a price rise. These are your Taylor Walkers, who's gone up 100k. It looks like the trend is going, that key forwards are back. Who knows if that lasts? At the moment it is. And yes, you're going to be missing 100k by jumping on him this week, but I don't fault anyone who does it. I mean, you look at the top 10 scorers for forwards and it's like Tex Walker's up there. We've got Harry Mackay up there. Josh Bruce is up there, which is insane, Clarky. So I don't think there's any issues with jumping on these guys a week late. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if you've picked another mid-pricer that hasn't we've had a few injuries recently with a few of those guys, like Caldwell last week, Hayden Young this week. So, I mean, if you're jumping on those guys now, is the better time to do it before they reach the peak? And then it kind of goes, well, is the value still there? Or am I trying to generate the cash from them? So, depending on what your purpose is, I think now is the time to grab guys like, if you missed Zeeble for some reason, go back and grab him. He's 341, but he is scoring very well. And CJ, if you CJ, get him now. I think he played a very brilliant game from what I did. Probably listen to maybe about a half, and then the end of the Cats Hawks game, and his name was just popping up everywhere. So he's got the role and he's got what you want him to do. There's no downside.
Yeah, if you've got these guys, I reckon a Tom Phillips, we'll talk about Lachie Neale in a second, but a Paddy Dow, a Hayden Young, if you've got these guys that aren't performing, I think move them on. There's not a heap of forwards, there's not a heap of rookies on the bubble this week. I think you can afford, if you've got the cash and a way to upgrade, you can go from one of your failed mid prices to one of these more successful mid prices and just swallow your pride and don't stress about it too much. General Saunders tweeted something today and he said, essentially, that's why you've got to have both. If you're going to go mid prices, you just got to have them all. And this appears to be the year so far that we should have really stocked up. Damo, if you've got a premium player who's underperforming, who do we look at targeting? Is it a sideways trade, or are we still going to look at generating value? What are you looking at doing with someone like a Lachie Neale who didn't really fire a shot again, certainly didn't fire a shot after halftime in that Brisbane game?
Yeah, and news has come out about a back scan that produced a worrying result as well for him. So until we get more information about that, then it's really a risk to hold on to him unless his form turns around. And we've seen that he does still have the scoring power, but he can't run out games because of the injury. And so sideways trading him might be the best option, but maybe you look for someone that's got a bit of a low break even, so you're still making a bit of cash from the trade at the same time. So you could, with some dual position, you could still jump on the likes of Jordan Ridley, who is the top averaging player in Supercoach at the moment and has a break even of 60. He's still going to make cash and he's still going to be able to get you to a point where you can say that you're increasing the value of your side. And that's really, it's Supercoach is a long game, so you can't get too impatient with your players, but I think there are situations where it's now or never, and you cut your losses with some.
Well, let's talk this. So if we're holding a Lachie Neale, maybe even a Clayton Oliver, who I know is going to get some rage trades, got held for a half, scored only 67 points and scored 57 of those after Matt DePaul went off. He's coming up against Mark O'Connor at Geelong this week, so it'll be interesting to see if he can break the tag there because it's coming. If you've got these guys, how do you justify like I can't look at my team and go, oh, I'm trading Clayton Oliver this week, and I don't know what to do. Damo, what do the people need to do? Like, is it as much as saying, yeah, abandon ship now, or do we back in the guys that we picked for a reason? Lachie Neale is obviously injury induced, but an underperforming player like a Clayton Oliver who has had one bad game, but let's call him underperforming for the sake of argument because there's a lot of defenders that fit this category as well. What do we do then if there's no injury concern?
I mean, the first thing is I wouldn't worry about players being tagged. It feels like teams are going to have a negating player this year to try and reduce the run out of the midfield because the new rules have created lots of spread and some teams have been able to handle it and some haven't. And so I think a negating player to go to that ball winning mid is going to be quite a common thing for most sides. It'll just be a case of how effective they are. Mark O'Connor has sort of come from the clouds as being an effective tagger, and now Geelong is a team that you don't want your best midfielder to come up against. So people who own the likes of Jack McRae and Zach Merritt and Jack Steele are going to come up against Mark O'Connor at some point and aren't going to want to deal with what they have to produce on the other side of a game. But I don't think a performance on the back of a tag is enough reason to trade a player out. I think they have to be doing badly over an extended period of time without being tagged to justify being a trade out.
Fair enough. All right, I want to switch the subject a little bit. And by the way, I do agree with you. I don't think Clayton Oliver is a trade target. I think he might get tagged again next week. Let's see what happens. But
And hopefully my
you back
rambling
him
made
in to
sense.
perform. Yeah, no, it always does, Damo.
I think sorry, just to touch on, I think what Damo said is the most important thing is the difference between underperforming and a down game. Clayton Oliver was tagged by Matt DeBoer, who for the last couple of years we've gone, hey, that guy will kill your Supercoach scores. He's a very good tagger, and he's got Mark O'Connor this week. That's 2 weeks where there's a reason, I guess, the reason and the excuse. With Lachie Neale, it's he's got injuries, he's been underperforming previously, and he's suffering from a tag. That's kind of a 3-strike situation. Like Clayton Oliver is going to come back to a game where he doesn't get tagged or anything like that, and he's going to pump out a 120 because that's what he does, because they're going to leave him unmetered. But you could say, for the example that I would have, I would say somebody, if you are a Josh Kelly owner, he is underperforming as well. So, he's still pumping out hundreds, but it's kind of where you draw that economic line between Lachie Neale is, now, is he under 700K now, or with the price changes, or is he still just over? Be under, wouldn't he?
I'm pulling that up right now for you, my friend. He's at 641K. He lost 80K.
Yeah.
Break even of 212, projected to lose another 50K next week.
Getting rid of him now is economically, from my perspective, would be the best option. But I think Damo kind of hit the nail on the head, where you're not going to trade out a Clayton Oliver on the back of that, because there's markings there of why that's happening, and that it's not going to be a trend.
Well, okay, let's talk. A couple of these gun midfielders, they've had down games, or Lachie Neale's injured or whatever. We've talked about the mid-price madness that is the forward line that's generating a lot of value. Key position players are scoring well. It's really good for the game. Let's cast our eye on the backline for a brief period of time. There are a lot of guys back here that we had locked in for, 110 averages. Braden Maynard, Nick Haynes, Caleb Daniel, Tom Stewart. Why are these players struggling so much in what we assumed would be rules that benefit them? Like kick mark, why are they scoring? I mean, they're not scoring awfully. They're not pumping out terrible, terrible scores, except Nick Haynes. Why aren't they performing the way we want them to, Clark?
So, one of the big trends that I noticed personally, being a Melbourne supporter, I noticed it mainly with one Jake Lever, where it seems that there is a lot more reward for guys who are doing work on intercept defending, and guys who are cutting off the competition, rather than, say, like even Stephen May. He takes the kickouts, and that's where the points are. Play on, get a really effective kick, go through. But Jake Lever is scoring. He scored 111 on the weekend. He turned up the previous week after breaking his own personal best for intercept marks, and that's where he is making all of his points. So that's where their defenders are really getting it from, I think. So the guys like Jaden Short, who use the ball really well, or even Caleb Daniel has had, I've got him in my team, and he has just been butchering it lately. It's very interesting to see that shift. Guys like Jordan Ridley are just absolutely killing it because he does a bit of everything, I think.
Well, another guy that's been killing it that does a bit of everything is Shannon Hurn. Once again, I'm not advocating for Shannon Hurn at $505,000, but he hasn't dropped below 100 yet, Damo. You're our West Australian man. Are we advising people to jump on Shannon Hurn at 1.5% ownership, or are we scared of him? Because I'm scared of him.
Oh, look, his age scares me because he has had issues with his legs through hamstrings and calf injuries, but he does take a majority of the kickouts, and he can kick pretty much the length of half of a field, and using the kickout seems to be one of the main generations of points for defenders in Supercoach this year, more so than it has been in previous years.
So, are we advocating for him, or are we advocating against him?
He's an option. I wouldn't go for him, but I can see why people would.
I guess my biggest concern from this year so far, it's not so much a concern, but maybe I misread the situation, and maybe I'm overreacting to 3 rounds, but I thought the guaranteed points were going to be in defence, and we needed to stock up there because there's no rookies, which has been the case. But the top end forwards and defenders, geez, forwards and mids, geez, they've been exciting. One of those guys, Damo, see, this is what we call a transition to a new topic, Damo, is Lachlan Fogarty, who you mentioned, who I love, who the 1%ers, go and check out their podcast, love. Lachlan Fogarty, Damo, you mentioned in pre-pod. Why do we want to talk about this man?
I think we were so into mid-prices on players who could return to the way that they were that we didn't look at mid-prices who could take the next step. And Lachlan Fogarty only went below 90 in round 1 when we didn't really know much about him, but then pumped out a massive score against the Dockers on the weekend, 163. He might be someone that you jump on just for the cash generation, especially with a break even of minus 29 at the moment.
Yeah, he is a cash generation option. That's kind of why I wanted to bring him to the discussion. I don't think he's a must-have by any chance, but he was flagged by all Geelong supporters when the Blues traded for him that he is an inside mid, and we saw him attend a fair bit of midfield time, or get a fair bit of midfield time on Sunday. I think it was Sunday, as well as going forward and impacting there. So he's one that you could potentially ride. He's locked into the best 22. He's Carlton's best tackler. He's the best recruit in the off-season for the Blues, which is surprising. And he's also got cash to generate break even of minus 29. We've talked about a lot of the cash generation so far in Tex Walker, Lachlan Fogarty, CJ, Jarman Impey, Jack Zeeble. There still are a few cheaper rookie price players you can jump on if you need to correct to people out there. So Clarky, I'm looking at guys like Lloyd Meek if you wanted to correct to him, Heath Chapman. If you don't have him, he's obviously on the bubble. Stephen, is it Stefan or Stephen Giro, Damo?
It is Stefan Giro, but I wouldn't recommend Lloyd Meek. I'd wait for team selection.
Ooh,
fair enough.
Spicy.
That's a spicy meatball. So there are still cheap guys that we can jump on, and then we're expecting Tom Highmore to come back into the side, right, for St Kilda?
You'd think so after the performance on the weekend, for sure.
And then Chad Warner's another one. So this is a guy that at 228k in the forward line, we're probably not talking about him quite enough. Break even negative 72. He's cheaper than the guys like Impey and Taylor Walker and that, and is playing reasonably well. He's the 14th ranked forward for the year and is averaging 92 points, 70, 94, and 112. He's looking more and more comfortable. Has been in the system a little while. I just think at 228k, it's still not too late to jump on him and ride a little bit of cash generation to everyone out there.
And I don't want people to get twisted about this, because you don't have to trade players if they're scoring well. Warner might be a rookie at the start, but if he averages 92 for the whole year, you don't have to trade him.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's he'd be a very handy F6, F7 if he was averaging 92. I suspect he probably won't, but hell, if he does, it's a good trade. And I'm more inclined to back in someone like him who's shown it so far than a Michael Frederick, who at 175k I think is also a decent option. Damo, a little bit more expensive, 57 and 67. What do you see as a Freo man?
He's creating a lot of the run at the moment for the Dockers because, well, they don't really have many others who are fit and available to do so, but he's a lot more confident in his ability this year than he was last year. Last year, he just seemed to run for the sake of it. This year, he's actually doing things with his disposals and creating a threat in front of goals.
So at 175k as a forward option, if you're looking for some cash gen, he's one I would like to look at. Boys, is there any primos that we're not getting too excited about? I'm just pulling up the currently most traded players, and then we'll continue this conversation.
I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit before we hit record, but and even a little bit during, guys like Tom Stewart, Caleb Daniel, Jaden Short, kind of been underperforming for what we want. Does that mean you jump to Ridley? Maybe. It's something that I am certainly looking at, just overall. But I mean, you back these guys for a reason. I think guys like Jaden Short and even Daniel and Stewart will jump back eventually. But I think I can definitely see some people trading them out for guys like Ridley this week, at least.
I think Ridley is a key target this week for coaches if they can find a way to get him. He's certainly playing much better than Caleb Daniel, Tom Stewart, etc. I'd be hard pressed to trade them because I'm kind of conservative in that. But I can understand targeting him. I can understand targeting even a Cam Guthrie at 580k after his huge performance today. What I am not super excited on is targeting anyone in the forward line who's a primo. So we talked about Taylor Walker. He's generating cash as a point output player. Obviously, he's like the highest average in the AFL right now. Clarky, he's not someone I want to target because I'm looking at the forward options coming back over the next couple of weeks. We got Dangerfield coming back, who's going to have a big break even. We've got Rowan Marshall coming back, who's going to be scoring well. So I think I'm not looking to trade in a forward. I'm looking to use swing sets to bring in a Ridley or a super uber midfielder with an underperforming player, but I think I'm steering clear of upgrading in the forward line until further notice.
Yeah, I would feel the same way. I mean, you look at it, it's really been the key forwards and even the small forwards game, like guys like Cozzy Pickett, 120. Josh Bruce kicked 10 goals, 170. Fogarty is probably the best option I think that we spoke about, just because his role wasn't predominantly reliant on him being a forward. But guys like Tex, if you want to bring him in because you think he's going to score well, that's fine. Hey, that's your boat to do. But the cash gen reason is gone. So if you're going to bring him in at 400k, you're backing him in for the next at minimum 6 to 8, possibly until the buys, and then if something dire happens and you need to bring it out. But
Fells, I want to throw a few names at you that I scoffed at in the preseason. Damo, I'll start with you. Just starting to put together a list of upgrade targets or players we might want to target in the coming rounds. The first name on that list is the 10th highest scorer for the year, Rory Sloane, who the people in the comments on the website proved once again that they're smarter than me. I said it was a ridiculous idea, and so far he's scored a 119, a 97, and a 141. Damo's Rory Sloane, a healthy Rory Sloane, returning to the Rory Sloane of old.
He looked good against the Suns. I actually think that Rory Sloane's good form could be the undoing of Rory Laird in the midfield.
I don't like that. Please elaborate.
Sorry.
It just felt like on the weekend, whenever Rory Sloane was doing well, Rory Laird got moved around the ground and it wasn't necessarily back to defence. So they seem to opt to have more Harry Schonberg, Sam Berry in the midfield with Rory Sloane and move Laird to the outside or even off the ground for periods of time. And it just meant that Laird wasn't scoring all that well and Sloane was the main man again in the middle.
Well, look, yeah, that's a worry. I'm still backing in Laird to pump out a average of 100 plus. It's a far cry from the 110 I wanted to see, but I think he's a reasonably safe option to hold on to. Rory Sloane, I think, is equally an enticing option to select at just 4.3% of teams. Callum Mills, again, another guy, the Sydney Swans are flying, and another guy that he showed once again why people were jumping on in the preseason. 154, 93, and 109. Clarky is Callum Mills in defence, someone that we should be rushing into our team.
Sydney are in a really, really hot form right now. Like it is sexy the way that they're playing football and just demolishing teams. it's really good to see. Callum Mills for me is somebody who I think I'd be happy to miss. Because the scores you just read out, it's like big score, you'd take that score, and then this week, 109. Once again, it's kind of you take that score. I don't think he's not setting it on fire as somebody who I'm like, you need to get him in right now. When you compared to like a Jordan Ridley or even Jake Lloyd, I think has been a little bit more consistent if I remember my numbers better. But
And the final name I want to throw at you, because people have been tweeting me. They've been asking me to talk about this man on the podcast, and I swore I wouldn't in 2021, but here we are. Daniel Rich at $493,000. 72 in round one. Awful. 113, 122. He heard my cries. He liked my tweets. He is the GOAT. Is Daniel Rich someone we need to be targeting in our defense? He's cheap and he's sexy.
Well, like maybe you need to take the stage on this one.
The floor is
I
yours.
love him. He plays Supercoach friendly football. For some reason, continually teams let him kick goals from outside 50. He's only done it once this year, but people give him the opportunity time and time again. He kicks, he's had at least 20 kicks in every game. I think he is a very good option. He's getting older, but I think it kind of makes me wish I stuck to my age-old rule. Don't pick defenders over 500k, because Daniel Rich would have been in my team and I would have been a very, very happy man. So I think he's a beautiful option for those playing at home.
I like it.
Alistair Clarkson, if you're listening, please don't drop Jacob Kaczynski, even if it's just for 20 points. Or Brett Ratton, if you're listening, please recall Tom Highmore. We need him.
Well, it's funny you mentioned them. If you have a little bit of cash, you can bring in Chapman for them, but upgrading rookies that are essentially haven't had any price increases gonna sting. And I don't know, maybe we need to find some more cash to get in another primo. Maybe we should all go back in time and start six defensive primos.
I would rather trade Tom Stewart to Daniel Rich than upgrade a rookie on my bench.
Wow. I'd rather do both. Bring
have
in
two
Rich and
trades.
Chapman. We don't have to trade people. That's the big thing
that's-
in round 3. We don't have to trade.
What the official podcast motto: do as we suggest, but not as we do.
Yeah, 100%, because we're very smart, but we don't execute on that very often.
Yeah, I can't wait to upgrade Fantasia to Fogarty this week, only to be crushed.
I just hope that people aren't jumping off their premiums. I guess if there's one thing I want to get across this episode, we've talked a lot about cash gen and jumping off players, but I think continue to back in your primos unless they've been injured or whatever, because we're 3 rounds into a 22-round season. We've got a long time to go, not a lot of trades to cover. And a guy like Jack McRae, who had a 108, we paid big money for him. He had 108 on the weekend. He comes up against Brisbane and he's a career average of 134 against him. So it can turn very quickly, and I think we need to back in our primos.
I watched that Good Friday game. Jack McRae, after halftime, he didn't have to do much. So I don't think he was doing much.
You think he just rested on his laurels after halftime? What did he have? He had how many disposals? 33 disposals, 34 disposals?
Something like that. But most of them were handballs, and he was on 70 at halftime or something. So I really don't think he cared all that much after halftime, and nor should he, because they won by 128 points.
Gee whiz. Well, that reminds me. Tex Walker's playing North Melbourne this week.
Jeez.
Remember that?
He's going to score 200.
Yeah, that thing that I said about not bringing in Tex Walker. Maybe consider it. He's
If
going to
Josh
murder
Bruce
them.
kicked 10, Taylor Walker could kick 15.
He could wrap up the Coleman in round 4.
Jeez,
50 goals. I can't believe Adelaide are going to kick 50 goals this week.
What primo am I going to downgrade to Taylor Walker this week?
I can't believe I traded Josh Dunkley to Taylor Walker because he was playing North Melbourne and then brought Josh Dunkley back in.
Oh, shit. All right, fellas. I don't know how helpful we've been, but hopefully people have enjoyed the pod. Tell us about what you guys are working on. What have you got coming up this week?
Well, me and Clarky have episode 4 of the mailbag coming out on Thursday, recording on Wednesday night. So make sure people get your questions in. There is a tweet on the Twitter page, and there's also the email jockmailbag@gmail.com, which they can send questions to.
And if you're listening on the website, drop a question below, #mailbag, so we know it's for the mailbag. Why not? It'd be a bit of fun.
Yeah, do that. We love answering your questions, and it's a good dynamic of Damo knows things and I pretend to know things. So, we meet somewhere in the middle and it's a really good time.
You've summarised the Jock Reynolds podcast very well there, boys. Thank you for joining me, Clarky.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Damo.
It's good to be here.
Peace.